Spiraling Flames Chapter 3. It was early morning in Konoha. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon and bring warmth to the cool forest air. Naruto and Azula had risen early that morning, so that Naruto could get in some fire-bending training before he had to attend the academy. They had gone to the training ground near their apartment before the sun rose. Once there, Naruto had begun to go through fire-bending forms and Azula had sat down on a stump and pulled out a scroll, using fire summoned in one of her hands to give her enough light to read it. Azula looked up from reading the scroll, to look at Naruto. He was going through the second tier of fire-bending forms, having just finished learning the first tier of forms to Azula's satisfaction. "Wrong," she called out, making him stop in the middle of performing a punch. "Your stance is too rigid. Loosen up, don't feel like you have to anchor your feet to the ground. Fire-bending forms involve a lot of footwork. You have to be ready to dodge and move at a moment's notice. Think of yourself as a flame, constantly flickering and changing. Start the form over from the beginning, and remember to stay on your toes more." "Right," Naruto called back to her. "I'll get it right this time, Azula." As he began the form again, she continued to watch him for a few moments, making sure he corrected his previous mistake. Seeing that he had indeed fixed his stance, she went back to studying the scroll she held in her lap. It had been 3 weeks since she had arrived in this world. 3 weeks since she had come to this village, and she started living with the blonde 10-year-old. In those 3 weeks she had come to learn more about Konoha, and the shinobi world. She had also gone to ask the Hokage if there was any way that she could learn to read and write in the language of this world. She had found that being illiterate was restricting at best, at its worst it was downright crippling to her interactions with the people of this village. Fortunately the Hokage had access to a scroll that had been written centuries earlier by the Senju clan when the lost Prince Ling had come to this world. Apparently the ancient prince had the same issue as she did, and with collaboration with his Senju caretakers had created this scroll that translated the two written languages, allowing them to learn. Azula found it almost too convenient that this scroll had been stored along with the other records of the lost prince's arrival in this world. But she wasn't one for looking a gift Komodo rhino in the mouth. Once she had access to the translations, she found that learning to read the language had been rather easy. She could now read nearly every sign she came across, but there was still room for improvement. Writing had been an altogether different story. She just couldn't seem to get the characters to look the way they were supposed to. She had burned many pieces of paper to ash in her anger, when she made mistake after mistake in writing the various kanji. "I'm done, Azula." Naruto called over to her. Looking up once again, she saw him standing, looking expectantly at her, waiting for her to give him the next exercise. She smiled, happy with his progress. The boy had taken to fire bending like a true prodigy. He soaked up the knowledge she shared with him, and he never made a mistake twice. "All right then," she said. "I want you to summon fire to your hand. We're going to run through heat manipulation again." Naruto nodded and held out his hand, palm facing upward, summoning a small fire to float above it. Seeing him ready to begin, Azula said, "Now focus on decreasing the heat." She watched as the fire in his hand became a more red color, showing it was cooling. "Good. Now quickly, make it as hot as you can," she commanded. Naruto's face became a mask of intense concentration, as the flame rapidly changed from red to orange, and then slowly became lighter in color. After a few moments it became a light blue in color. "Well done," Azula praised. "Now bring down the temperature slowly." As she watched the blonde boy continue the exercise, Azula couldn't help but wonder how great his skill would grow in months and years. He had shown that he could control fire to an extent she had never seen before except in masters like her father and uncle. He had the innate ability to shape fire and make it move to his will. His fire seemed denser, for lack of better word, than that of other firebenders. Increasing and decreasing the heat was a little bit more difficult for him, but he was improving rapidly. He could already summon blue fire if he concentrated hard enough. Azula suspected that in a few months he would be able to use it with ease, and likely be able to apply it to battle. She thought about how frightening he would be on the field of battle in latter years. While she didn't know all of what his shinobi training involved, she did know it involved learning how to use and master several types of weapons, including throwing knives. That combined with his natural talent for firebending would make him fearsome indeed. If what the Hokage had told her was true, he would also be able to access a demon's power later on in life as well. Thinking of the raw potential and power this boy had made Azula shiver. She had learned to appreciate power at an early age, and Naruto certainly had staggering amounts of it. She had already begun trying to think of ways to bring him to the Fire Nation with her when she returned. The village seemed to have alienated Naruto to a great extent, so convincing him to leave might not be too hard. It also helped that he seemed to hang on her every word and action. She didn't know whether this was a result of him finally having found a familial connection, distant as it may be, or if it was something more akin to hero worship. It could perhaps be simple infatuation. No matter what it was, it would work in her favor. If he wanted family, she could always convince her father to adopt the boy into the royal line officially. Her father respected power, and she was certain that Naruto would be a much better son than Zuko. If it was hero worship, she would play on that to make want to help her in her quest for the throne. If his feelings were that of infatuation, she would feed and increase those feelings until they became love. She make herself seem like the only woman who could understand him, the only one who was worthy of him. She knew of course that if this was the course of action she needed to take, it would mean reciprocating the boy's feelings, although that wouldn't be so bad. She could tell even now that Naruto would be quite the looker as he grew older. The only two problems she could think of in her plan were that she had as of yet no way of deciphering which of these feelings Naruto held for her. The second problem was the Hokage. The old man seemed to care for boy quite a bit. Indeed, he doted on the boy and treated him like a grandson. However, he had also hinted that Naruto would be a powerful asset to the village in later years, likely much for the same reasons that Azula wanted him to go to the Fire Nation. More importantly, Naruto obviously cared for the aged shinobi leader, which would make it more difficult to convince him leave Konoha. She had no idea how she was going to be able to remove the Hokage as an obstacle, but she suspected she have an opportunity to solve her first problem later on that day. A week ago Naruto had approached Azula rather nervously. He had informed her that the next week there was to be an open house day at the academy. Apparently this was a day when family and friends of the students were allowed to come to class and watch them. The students were supposed to be showing off their skills and knowledge to observers as well as scoring points to add to their overall grades. After Naruto had explained all this to Azula, he had asked if she would like to come watch him, since she was the closest and only relative he had. The opportunity was too great to pass up. Not only would she be able to possibly decipher the boy's feelings, but she would be able to learn more of the shinobi arts. She knew terribly little of these warriors, other than that they were adept at using stealth and seemed to possess superhuman powers. She suspected that their power might even surpass those of benders, but she had no way of knowing just yet. It had also been an opportunity to instill some pride as into the young boy, pride in the Fire Nation, and in his royal heritage, both of which he would need if Azula's plan was to succeed. Upon hearing that he would be showing his skills in front of many of the noble clans of Konoha, Azula had dragged Naruto into town to find suitable clothing for him to wear. She wanted him to wear clothes that would show he was descended from royalty, and at the same time, allow him the freedom of movement in battle. It wasn't that Azula actually cared what the clans of the village thought of her or Naruto, but if he was able to impress them, it would make the boy happy that he wasn't being looked down on. He would then associate this happiness with pride in the Fire Nation and the royal family. This in turn would make it easier for Azula to convince him to come back to her world with her. If this showed the so-called noble clans what true nobility was like, that was just a bonus in her eyes. She had eventually found an outfit that was so perfect for the occasion that Azula had briefly wondered if these events were being guided destiny or fate. The outfit had consisted of a loose pair of black pants and shirt. On top of those was placed a long flowing robe that was deep red in color and had gold trim. Azula had paid for the outfit to be modified to Naruto's exact size, and also threw in a little extra to have the Fire Nation emblem sewn into the back of the robe in black thread. All in all, it had cost them a chunk of their monthly stipend, but Azula thought it well worth the expense. She knew of course that Naruto would outgrow the outfit quickly, but it would serve its purpose for the moment, and other outfits could be acquired later. Azula took notice of the sun's position in the sky, and called out to Naruto. "Naruto, that's enough training for now. It appears to be time to leave for the academy." Hearing the older girl's call, the blonde bounded over to her as she stood up and put away her scroll. Heading out of the training ground, the pair made their way through the streets of Konoha. Most people were only just now starting to head out of their homes, so they didn't encounter much traffic on the way to the academy. When they finally arrived, they found that they were a little early. Several students and their parents had already arrived and were standing in the schoolyard. Azula also took notice that the Hokage was also in attendance and was talking to one of the academy instructors. Azula and Naruto stood a little ways off from the rest of the group and waited for the classes to start so that they could enter the building. As more and more students and their families showed up, a few of the children took notice of Naruto's new appearance and Azula's presence next to him, and began to quietly mutter amongst themselves about who this girl was and why she was next to the class clown. After a few minutes, a group of the more curious children came over to them. Azula watched as they approached Naruto. A boy with brown hair and red markings on his face walked up to the blonde before asking the question they all had on their minds. "Hey, Naruto, what's up with the weird clothes?" he asked. Naruto simply shrugged before replying. "They're just new clothes that I'm supposed to wear. They're supposed to be more fitting for someone of royal blood to wear than what I had before." This statement made the brown-haired boy blink in confusion. He seemed to be thinking about the implications of Naruto's answer when a girl with long blonde hair spoke up. "Yeah right, Naruto baka. You're not even from a noble clan, let alone royalty," the girl said in a disbelieving tone. It was at this point that Azula decided to join the conversation. "How do you know?" she asked. The children all turned their attention to the older girl. A pink-haired girl raised her hand, as if she were in class, and asked, "Who are you?" Before Azula could answer, another voice spoke up. "Her name is Azula Uzumaki." Everyone turned their heads to see the Hokage walking over to the group. "Azula here is a princess from a very distant land. She's come to stay in Konoha for now though, and is living with Naruto, who is her distant relative." When he said this, the group of children turned back to Naruto and Azula with looks of surprise and awe. Several of the girls appeared to have stars in their eyes, as they looked at Azula. They couldn't believe that they were meeting a real princess. The brown-haired boy who had asked Naruto about his clothing laughed. "Oh, so she's his relative? And here I thought the idiot might have gotten a girlfriend," he said in a teasing tone. Azula silently thanked the boy. This was just the kind of comment that she had been waiting for. If Naruto had indeed become infatuated with her, he would likely have some reaction to this comment. If he did react, she could use this situation to help determine if this was the course of action she would need to take in order to bring him to the Fire Nation. She looked down at the blonde boy next to her and noticed a light blush on his face. Azula smirked. Oh yes, that was what she was hoping for. Still, it could be embarrassment from the thought of having a girlfriend rather than having her specifically as an object of affection. She knew that children around Naruto's age were often easily embarrassed when it came to the thought of dating and romance. She would have to see if this was because of her, or simply because of the idea. Azula leaned down, and wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck, putting her face next to his. Oh, she questioned, looking right at the brown-haired boy. Are you certain I'm not his girlfriend? You know, royalty often marry family to keep the line pure, and Naruto-kun here is my distant relative, she said, making use of the kun honorific she had learned in the past few weeks. She was pleased to see Naruto's face go bright red. She watched him open his mouth and try to form words, only for nothing to come out. That reaction told her all she needed to know. The blonde had developed a crush on her. With time she could, and would feed this affection in order to make him completely loyal to her. Of course she had no way of knowing how long it would be before she could go home, but if all went to plan, Naruto would willingly come with her and fight for the Fire Nation. Naruto was frantically trying to think of a way out of this embarrassing situation. It was bad enough when Kiba had joked about Azula being his girlfriend, but when the older girl put her arms around him and mentioned marriage, his brain almost shut down. Over the course of the last 3 weeks he had come to like Azula. He knew from the beginning that she was pretty, and powerful. That much was obvious by just looking at her, but it was when she had promised to never hate or fear him, like the villagers did, that he had really begun to look at her in a different light. He'd had a crush on Sakura, one of his classmates, for a while, and now he had developed one on Azula as well. He didn't make it as obvious as he had with Sakura, knowing that Azula was rather proud, and for that matter scary. He would have felt ridiculous asking the older girl out on a date, especially since he really had no idea what to do on one. He only asked Sakura on dates because he'd heard it was a good way to bond with those you liked, and she had been nice to him when the academy first started. All this coupled with the fact that, even if it was only a joke, this was the first time a girl had shown a possibility of returning his feelings. It was just too much for the boy's brain, making him dangerously close to overloading. Fortunately, he was saved from further embarrassment when his teachers called everyone inside to begin the class. As the people filtered into the classroom, the students took their seats and their families took spots along the edge of the class to observe them. Once everyone had settled into their spots, an instructor with a scar on his face addressed the guests and the Hokage. Welcome, everyone, to this year's open house. I'm Irika Umino, one of the instructors here at the academy. We are honored to have you all here to see how your children are coming along and what they are learning. We are also most honored to have Hokage-sama here with us today. For the next hour and a half the teachers asked questions about the history of Konoha and the shinobi world, calling on different students to answer each question. Through this Azula learned that the village had only been around for a little over a century. She was also completely surprised to learn that ninjutsu could be used to fight using all 4 elements, as well as other elements for a select few individuals, like the famed Shodaime Hokage, who controlled the wood element, Mokuton it was called. Azula, for the first time in her life, felt a little small. She was living in a strange new world, filled with people who had power akin to that of the Avatar. This realization made Azula come to 2 conclusions. The first was that if there was ever any doubt about whether manipulating Naruto into coming to the Fire Nation was a good idea or not, it was now gone. She not only wanted him to come, she needed him to come with her. The power of a demon inside of him, plus the ability to fight with all the elements, and a natural skill in fire bending, the boy would be the greatest warrior the Fire Nation had ever seen. He would be the sword that would deliver her the throne, and eventually the entire world. Oh yes, she would make sure Naruto came with her. no matter what. The second realization she came to, was that if she fought a higher level shinobi, she would be easily outclassed. She would have to find a way to either start learning the shinobi arts or find a way to counter them. If she was unable to do this, she had a feeling that she would very likely die before ever being able to get home to her own world. She understood now why she had felt such an instinctive fear of the Umbu and the Hokage now. To them killing her would be child's play. It was a terrifying thought, that the power that made the Avatar such a dangerous opponent was available to so many in this world. After the questions about the history of the village and shinobi world, the teachers took the students and observers outside to a training area where several human-shaped targets were set up. The teachers had students line up behind the targets and throw 10 kunao at them. Azula made note of each student that did exceptionally well, landing 7 or more kunao in the target. Of these students were the brown-haired boy from earlier, a dark-haired boy in a blue shirt and white shorts, a girl with pale eyes and blue hair, a boy that wore dark glasses and a high-collared jacket. She was quite happy when she saw Naruto join their ranks as he landed 7 kunao in his target, and she was even happier when she noticed a few of the adults looking surprised and impressed. Azula suspected that Naruto may have gotten lucky, as he had mentioned before that he was only ever ranked in the middle of the class when it came to throwing weapons like kunao and shuriken. Even so, it didn't matter if it was luck, as long as the adults of the noble clans assumed it was skill they would be impressed. Next, the academy instructors lead the group over to several circular arenas. Here the instructor with the scar on his nose, Irika, gathered the attention of the guests. Now, here we're going to have each of the students spar against an instructor so that they can show off what they've learned. Because the student's opponent will be a Chunin, the students will be allowed to use some of their jutsu, he said. With that announcement, the students began gathering into groups at the different arenas to wait for their turn to fight. Azula noticed that Naruto was standing fairly close to her. She also noticed the Chunin he was supposed to fight was the white-haired peasant that had called her a child, several weeks earlier. Smirking, she walked over to Naruto and grabbed his shoulder, making the boy look up at her. Leaning down to whisper in his ear, she said, "Naruto, I want you do your absolute best to defeat this man. Have you shown your classmates or teachers your bending yet?" Naruto shook his head. Azula had expressly told him not to bend without her around early on in their training. Good. She all but purred. I give you permission to use it against this man. You likely don't have the skill to defeat him outright just yet. But if you manage to surprise him, you'll throw him off guard and that will give you the edge. Do you understand? He nodded. I do, Azula. Good. Oh, and Naruto? Remember that when you fire bend you must be ruthless to your opponent. No matter who they are. No mercy, just like I taught you. Don't disappoint me. With that said, she returned to spot among the observers, and waited for Naruto to face Mizuki. As she waited, she saw the Hokage walk up to stand beside her. Looking down at the 14-year-old girl, the man spoke. What did you have to say to young Naruto? He asked. Looking at the old shinobi leader, Azula said, I just told him to do his best, and to remember his training. Breathing out a stream of smoke from his pipe, the old man nodded in acknowledgement. I see. I must say that I'm rather looking forward to seeing that bending you've been teaching the boy. He gave a chuckle at the look of surprise the girl gave him. Oh, don't be so surprised that I know. I told you before, I know everything that happens in this village. Azula just remained silent and turned her attention back to where Naruto was. Naruto was bursting with anticipation. After 3 weeks of learning fire bending from Azula, he was finally getting to show it off. He knew he had only mastered the first few forms, meant for beginners, and was only just beginning to learn the second-tier forms. But he felt confident that he could use his abilities in a spar like this. Naruto was also eager to impress Azula, and show her that he was worthy of her tutelage. She had specifically asked him not to let her down, and he would do his absolute best to live up to her expectations. After what seemed like hours, Naruto finally got his turn to spar against the white-haired Chunin. Stepping into the ring, Naruto made the customary bow to his opponent. When Mizuki bowed back, they both got into their respective stances, Mizuki taking the Academy Taijutsu stance and Naruto taking a fire-bending stance. As Naruto looked at the Chunin across from him preparing to spar, he felt something in him rise. It was the same surging feeling that he'd felt when he first used his will to fire bend. This time, however, the surge came with a rush of heat. His whole body felt warm, as if he had been exercising for hours on end. As the proctor began the match, he rushed at Mizuki, launching a punch at the man's torso. Mizuki easily blocked it and responded with a kick. Naruto saw the kick coming, but barely managed to dodge it by leaping to the right. He attacked the Chunin with a kick of his own, which was also blocked. Mizuki sent a punch to Naruto's stomach, knocking the young boy back a few feet, and causing him double over for a second. All through the fight thus far, Naruto had felt the surge in him growing, expanding, begging to explode out of him. Rather than let it go, he had grabbed onto it, for lack of better word. The more he held onto the surging feeling, the hotter his body felt. He had kept holding onto it until he felt like his body would burst into flames. Now that Mizuki had knocked Naruto back a few feet, the boy saw an opening to surprise Mizuki. The blonde charged forward once again and saw Mizuki smirk, obviously thinking the boy was going to recklessly try another frontal assault. When he was less than a foot away from the white-haired man, Naruto stopped and dropped into a crouch, using his momentum to swing his right leg to the left in a sweeping gesture. As he did this, he let the surge inside him go, and he felt it shoot forth, flowing down his body towards his legs. When the surge reached his foot, watched a stream of bright orange fire blast out, following the sweeping arc his foot had made. The blast of fire caught Mizuki completely off guard, but he wasn't a Chunin for nothing. He managed to dodge the orange blaze at the last second by jumping over it. Naruto saw this as he quickly got back on his feet, feeling the surge return full force. As Mizuki landed, Naruto kept up his assault, sending a punch that launched a blast of fire at the man's chest just as his feet hit the ground. Mizuki once again dodged the attack at the last moment, this time by putting all his weight on his left foot and spinning into his left. This left him off balance, however, a fact Naruto took note of. He kicked high in the air, launching a stream fire that caught Mizuki in the right shoulder. As the fire hit the Chunin, he gave a cry of pain and grabbed his shoulder with his left hand. A move that left him wide open. Naruto hesitated just for a moment. For one moment that seemed to drag on for an eternity, the blonde boy considered what he was about to do. He thought of the fact that this man was his teacher. He thought of the fact that he had probably scored enough points in the match to boost his grade in the class and impress the people watching. For one moment Naruto considered backing off and letting Mizuki recover. Then Azula's words rang through his mind. "No mercy. Don't disappoint me." Remembering those words, spoken to him by the girl who had come into his life so recently and suddenly. The girl who had quickly come to mean so much to the boy, Naruto made a choice. At that moment Naruto made a decision that would lead him down a path he never knew existed. He steeled himself and sent a punch and a blast of orange fire forwards. The blaze hit the Chunin right on his lower face. The man screamed as hot orange fire covered the left side lower jaw, and as he screamed some of the fire poured into his mouth, burning it in his throat. As Mizuki screamed and fell down clutching his face, the proctor rushed to the fallen Chunin, and called over the medics, who'd been standing by near the arenas. The medics immediately began to apply medical ninjutsu to the fallen man's wounds. As more medics rushed over, Naruto could only stand in there in shock, not really believing what he just did. He was vaguely aware of one of the Chunin pulling him away from the arena, to get him out of the way of the medics. He felt a hand on his shoulder spin him around, and he came face to face with Azula, who kneeling in front of him. The dark-haired girl pulled him into a hug, allowing him to bury his face in the space between her neck and shoulder, as tears poured down his face. Azula stroked his golden hair and began whispering words of comfort in his ear, telling him he did what he was supposed to, and that it wasn't his fault, that he had done well. All the commotion had drawn everyone's attention to Mizuki, who was now being taken away on a stretcher. As parents pulled the faces of their children away from the scene, or as some watched the morbid spectacle, only the Hokage noticed Azula comforting Naruto. Only the Hokage saw the smile on the girl's face. Azula stood in the Hokage's office. Shortly after Mizuki had been taken to the hospital and the families and students had been sent home, the Hokage had taken Naruto and Azula to the Hokage Tower. Naruto had been left outside the office with an umbu, but Azula had been all but dragged through the doors. Needless to say, the Hiruzen Sarutobi was not happy. On the contrary, he was absolutely livid, and it showed. "Give me one reason," he said, "give me one good reason why I should not have you taken away and executed for what you've done, girl." It took every ounce of Azula's self-control to keep from breaking under the man's stare. She focused on breathing, happy that while the aged shinobi was angry, he wasn't releasing any of the killing intent that he had when they had first met. Steeling herself, Azula looked at the man, and finally spoke. "I'm not sure what you mean, Hokage-sama. I haven't done anything except train Naruto in firebending. Which, as you stated, you already knew about." "That's not what I mean, and you know it," he growled at her. "I saw your reaction to what happened. You were happy about it. You were happy he injured Mizuki like that." It was true. When Azula had told Naruto to use firebending in the fight, she had expected him to score a glancing blow at best. When she had seen him hit the white-haired man with his flames directly in the face, she had been ecstatic. It gave her an opportunity to further her bonds with the boy, and cement his loyalty to her. Of course she hadn't expected the Hokage to react like this, at least not so soon. Yet she was not completely unprepared. She had a plan, she had no idea if it would work, but it was still a plan. "Of course I was happy," she stated. "I watched my pupil surpass everyone's expectations of him, including my own. I watched him land a crippling, and winning, blow on an opponent who completely outclassed him in every way. If that is not reason to be proud and happy for him, I do not know what is. I can honestly say that I did not expect the outcome of his match, but I will not hide that I am pleased by it. I'm pleased that my student has come so far so fast, not because of what happened to the Chunin. Truthfully, it is the man's fault for underestimating Naruto. If he had not done so, he would likely be just fine." The Hokage growled. Azula was making a point, a good one. He knew there was more to it than she let on, but he wasn't sure what, and she hadn't lied to him at all. Looking her in the eye, he said, "Naruto could be mentally scarred from this." Azula stared right back. She had expected this issue to be brought up the moment Naruto had wounded Mizuki. She already had her counter-argument ready. "If he has been emotionally hurt, then I will comfort him. Also, if he is planning to become a shinobi, he will have to commit acts like this and much worse, quite often, unless I've been misled as to the purpose of your occupation. I would think it would be better for him and others like him to learn this early on. I certainly did when my father had me study the arts of war." The Hokage grimaced. She had made another good point, one he wished weren't true, but unfortunately it was. Indeed, in the past many shinobi had learned the same lesson at early ages. Especially during the Great Shinobi Wars. Reaching up to pinch the bridge of his nose, he let out a sigh. "You realize, of course, that while my law still stays in effect, It is likely that few of the more stupid individuals in the village may see this as reason to come after the boy's blood. He asked her. Then I will protect him. Azula replied. She saw the Hokage look back at her, somewhat disbelieving. Hokage-sama, whether you realize it or not, in the short time I've been here that boy, Naruto, has become more important to me than you can possibly imagine. She didn't tell him why he was important, of course, but she wasn't lying. It was a half-truth, but not one nearly as obvious as the one she'd tried telling when she first arrived in the village. Staring the man right in the eyes, Azula continued. Believe me when I say that I will never willingly let harm come to that boy, nor will I ever intentionally make his life more difficult. I will protect him all I can. Furthermore, I know that right now I can give him the comfort he needs. Were you to execute me, or separate me from him, I suspect he would irreversibly damaged. Sarutobi was angry. He was angry at this girl for teaching Naruto techniques that had caused this incident, although he knew that many clan children had far more dangerous techniques in their arsenal. He was angry at her for making 3 well thought out and valid points. He was angry at her because, even though it wasn't truly her fault, Naruto had taken his first step into the shinobi world. A step he suspected the boy hadn't been ready to take. He was angry at her because she was right. He couldn't punish the girl because she had done nothing wrong, nor could he punish Naruto, for he had obviously not truly expected to be able to harm the Chunin instructor, and had learned a harsh lesson. He would have to speak to the boy at another time, and make it very, very clear that such attacks were never to be performed against a fellow Konoha shinobi or ally, and that if he did so again he would be severely punished. However, the best thing that could be done now was to try to help cope with the situation. Take Naruto home, he said to Azula. Take him home, and let him rest and be there for him as much as you can. I will need to speak to him about this incident at some point, but for now let him rest. Azula smiled inwardly, knowing that her gamble had paid off, and he had won this particular battle. She bowed to Hokage and left the office. Once she exited, she took Naruto and exited the tower, heading to their apartment. Neither of them spoke on the way there. When they entered the apartment, she guided him to his room and sat down on the bed next to him. She cupped his chin and made him look at her. Naruto, she spoke. Know that what you did today was not your fault. I understand that this is the first time you have inflicted pain on another person like that. I know that it is hard to deal with. I know that it is frightening. I went through it too. You need to know that as a shinobi, you will have to hurt others, and kill to do your job, to defend your land and its people. What you did today was not wrong. It was merely the first step on a journey you must take, a hard step, but a necessary one. As she said all this, she looked into Naruto's eyes and saw that he was indeed listening to her. She saw her words were having some comforting effect on the boy. Remember when I told you about the burden of power? She asked him. Receiving a nod from the boy, she continued. This is part of that burden. You had the power to harm that man, to defeat him in battle. It was your duty to do your best in the fight, and so when you saw an opportunity to win, you took it. That is power. Had your opponent had more power, he would not have lost. Had he not underestimated you, he would not have been injured. The fault lies with him, not you. Others may come to resent you for this incident, they may go to greater lengths to shun you, for now they have seen a taste of your true power. But remember, I will never shun you. I will never hate or fear you. There is one final thing I wish to tell you, Naruto. Today, your actions made me very proud. When Azula said those last words, Naruto's eyes widened. He felt a mix of emotions, happiness, guilt, sorrow, anger, and fear all bottled up into one, great blob of indecipherable feeling. When he heard Azula say she was proud of him, he reacted on pure instinct, unable to truly form a coherent thought. He tackled her onto the bed, burying his face into the older girl's chest. Sobs racked his body as he held on the Fire Nation princess for dear life, wanting nothing more than to hold the girl and be held by her until this pain went away. And as Azula wrapped her arms around him, she was content to let him. They lay there together in each other's arms until sleep took them.